With all due respect for everyone's sacred cows, let's cut to the chase. Our current financial troubles are largely the result of an institutionalized deception that says that there isn't enough money to provide for public needs because our national debt is too big, while at the same time feeding all the money it wants to one particular sector of political and financial control, the sacred cow of Wall Street. That sector is the big private banks, financial speculators, and their colleagues at the Federal Reserve. These are the folks who run the monetary show, deciding who benefits, how much, and how the money supply is managed in our society. In reality, America has plenty of money. It's just that it's in the control of private banks rather than the American public. The wealth of America should belong to its citizens, not just its banks and corporations, as community banker George Bailey pointed out to his customers.
You're thinking of this place all wrong, as if I had the money back in a safe. The money's not here. Well, your money's in Joe's house. That's right next to yours. And in the Kennedy house, and Mrs. Maitland's house, and 100 others. You're lending them the money to build, and then they're going to pay it back to you as best they can. Now, what are you going to do, foreclose on them?
We need to take back control of America's money. Here's the interesting thing about money. It's all made up. Really. Money doesn't represent a pile of gold somewhere or some physical commodity. Banks don't go into a vault to pull out cash that they have lying around. They literally create money when they provide loans. Money is merely a representation of debt, and this debt materializes, voila, by the stroke of a bank's digital keyboard. When a business or a government needs more money to keep things moving, a necessity for any growing enterprise, it can create more money by taking on more debt. In the context of our current private banking system, economic vitality and growth require new debt. No debt, no growth. The privilege to issue money and control its supply was once reserved as the sole right of sovereign nations rather than private interests. Today, however, the folks who manage the money flow are private parties solely interested in profit. Their main agent is the Federal Reserve, the Fed. Now, most folks think that the Fed is an agency of the government. Not so. The Federal Reserve System consists of 12 Federal Reserve banks, all of them owned by other private banks, as one of their lawyers clarified in court.
Each Federal Reserve Bank, the stock is owned by the member banks in the district, 100% privately held. They have private boards of directors. Majority of those boards are appointed by the independent banks, private banks in the district. They are not agencies. They have no rule-making authority, and they do not have adjudic authority.
So the Fed is actually independent of public control, even though its policies affect the entire country. Indeed, the whole world. The Fed serves the banks that own it, and its biggest owners are the too-big-to-fail banks. For example, after receiving trillions of dollars in nearly free credit surrounding the bailout of 2008, the banks had no obligation to share that money with the public. Instead, bank lending actually plummeted, starving small businesses, causing catastrophic shrinkage of employment and cancellation of public services. During this same 2.5-year period, the Fed advanced over $16 trillion in short-term credit to domestic and foreign private banks that were foundering from their own reckless policies. The American public and small businesses received just 1/16 of this gigantic sum for their economic stimulus in 2008 and 2009. And here's how much of that $16 trillion the Fed would have had to advance to cover all the painful state budget shortfalls following the bank-generated crisis. But the Fed said, we can't help. It's not our job. Think about that for a minute. The $16 trillion the Fed created with just a few keystrokes and advanced to private banks is greater than the entire accumulated debt of the United States in its 235-year history. The Fed did this without public discussion or a vote. Indeed, the Fed shielded this transaction from public view. Money that could have secured the public interest was instead diverted to shore up private interests. The result? An unprecedented transfer of wealth to the richest segment of society. The public was left holding the bag. while bank profits and salaries continued to grow and selfish banking practices continued. And it's not just here in America. Monetary control by a network of private banks is a global fact of life that has thrown entire nations into the financial abyss. Is there an alternative? Yes. The first order of business is to take back control of public money from private interests. One proven way is called public banking. Banks owned by the public and dedicated to serving the people. A public bank manages public revenues for public purposes. Its shareholders are the people. Its growth feeds the public sector. It helps create local financial sovereignty and security, lowers taxes and community project costs, expands employment, and helps local businesses thrive. The proof of these claims is almost 100 years old. The Bank of North Dakota, the only publicly owned bank in the United States. It has been largely responsible for that state's sizable budget surplus, low taxes, high employment rate, failure-free bank history, and vibrant economic environment. And perhaps most telling, the financial debacle of 2008 had no effect on North Dakota because its money was invested at home, on Main Street, not on Wall Street. And another important thing, you know that deficit so many politicians are screaming about? With publicly owned banks, accumulated debt can be rolled over when and for as long as necessary. Why? Because public debt owed to a publicly owned bank is interest-free. It never actually has to be repaid at all. Since most money today is created as a debt, the public debt is our money. Imagine what states would look like today if they hadn't entrusted over $1 trillion of their tax revenues to Wall Street. Pension funds could be secure, infrastructure projects and public services could be supported and enhanced, and jobs would be a natural part of a vibrant, affordable credit environment, just like in North Dakota. This is why we need to take control of our money. The existing system, this institutionalized deception that our democratic government controls the creation of public money, needs to be replaced. Public banking, banking in the public interest, is the proven alternative. There's a growing movement underway right now to expand public banking all across America. With your support, it can take hold in your community and state. Visit publicbankinginstitute.org to sign up and help your community reclaim control of our money. After all, it is our money and our democracy.